Hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. I'm Seth.
And I'm Zach.
And we are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right. We are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right. How are you today, Zach?
Oh, I'm doing lovely.
I got a bit of a cold, so pardon my nasaliness, which I'm usually nasally because I'm from New England. But...
yeah, we're all a little nasally. I have chronic allergies, so that's why I...
Oh, so do I. That's why I take allergy medication every day.
Yes.
But yeah, so I have a bit of a cold, and the way we're doing these episodes, I may have a bit of a cold longer than I actually had it.
Yeah.
According to the episodes and how they roll out here. But anyway, yeah, so this is our first episode after our post-PAX pod, and one of our first episodes after we've actually come back from PAX in real life. So it's actually kind of fun to think about, going to the show. Thanks for everyone who provided interviews with us during the show. Hope you guys enjoyed the episode. But back to reality now. And we walked in, back from PAX. We put our stuff down, and producer Doug came over and gave us a litany of games to talk about because he's in charge. So he gave us a pile of games to talk about. He did also want us to talk about Eidos. Did we talk about Eidos before?
I don't remember.
Are the Eidos people that made the game that we're going to talk about today?
Eidos are the publishers. Core Design made the game.
Yeah. So we're talking a little bit about Eidos.
A little bit about Eidos, yeah.
Yes, perhaps we'll talk more about Eidos in an Eidos dedicated episode. But yes, today's episode is coming to you the yellings of producer Doug, and we have some other episodes that are queued up that were all requested by our great producer, who sometimes produces more than he should and sometimes produces less than we'd want him to, or less than he would. I don't know.
He produces the right amount for how much we pay him.
How much he pays himself, you mean? He pays us. He's the producer.
Yeah.
Showrunner, owner, content creator.
We're actually both Doug using voice modulators.
No, we're not.
Yeah, Doug's talking to
employees.
himself right now. You're right. Wouldn't that be wild?
That we're not employees?
No, that we were both just one person who was just pitching their voice slightly differently in post to make it sound like we're having a full conversation with another person.
Well, with the amount of our listeners, it's probably be about the same. With the ramblings of somebody who's psychotic. So, six one half egg of whatever the dozen or whatever you say.
Yeah. Fool me once, can't be fooled again. Whatever George Bush said.
Yeah. Mission accomplished. Do you remember that Bush sitcom that was on?
What? That's My Bush?
That's My Bush.
Yeah, that had a boppin' soundtrack for its theme.
Yeah, I think they have like 4 episodes.
Yeah, well, my favorite thing with That's My Bush is that, first of all, it was by the South Park guys. So it was developed really quickly and filmed very quickly. So a lot of the things it parodies are stuff that they just assumed would happen in Bush's administration. But like, most of it was done pre 9/11, so it doesn't even reference that. But the thing I remember most is that he has a wacky neighbor who just shows up. And it's the guy who lives at the house next door to the White House. And he's just like, well, hey, George, how's it going?
Is it Larry O'Shea?
Yeah, Larry O'Shea. Yeah, the wacky neighbor.
Yeah, there was 8 episodes for That's My Bush.
And the last episode is called That's My Dick because Bush gets impeached and Dick Cheney takes over.
No, it's Fare Thee Welfare.
Oh, that's right. But there has a whole thing where it's Dick Cheney is that.
Yes, president. I think it's probably themed as That's My Dick.
Yeah,
because it is about it goes through presidential impeachment.
Yeah,
but it is called Fare Thee Welfare. I like that there's a DVD set that's available.
Oh, hell yeah.
For That's My Bush.
Man, that and Little Bush. Bush,
the animated
show, Little Bush, yeah,
had double the amount of episodes.
It did. I remember watching that more often. But
so to get away from the early 2000s sitcoms, and we can move on to talking about some early 2000 video games. But first, Zach.
Yes, Seth.
What have you been recently playing?
Seth, recently I've been playing the Fortress of Dr. Radiaki Fancy Edition. Released May 2025, the Fortress of Dr. Radiaki Fancy Edition is a re-release of a game called the Fortress of Dr. Radiaki, which was released in 1994 from Future Visionary Incorporated. The original game and the Fancy Edition are a first-person shooter that kind of has a Wolfenstein 3D aesthetic in that it's kind of very clunky-looking first-person shooter where the graphics aren't quite as good as even Doom, where everything's still very, very flat and not quite on par with the stuff that was slightly later in the 90s. The difference, though, between The Fortress of Dr. Radiaki and Wolfenstein 3D is that Wolfenstein 3D is a good game, and Dr. Radiaki was a bad game. In fact, it was a bad game when it was released, but on Steam, you can pick up the Fancy Edition for a couple of bucks. And I was watching a YouTuber I like named Civi, and Civi did a kind of, it was a collection of just like games that he usually focuses on one game during his reviews, and he put a bunch of games in like one episode. He's like, games I just didn't get to, and he mentioned The Fortress of Dr. Radiaki Fancy Edition, and he said, it's still a bad game, but I love it. And I was kind of like moved by Civi's love of it to try it out myself, and I picked up Fancy Edition. Fancy Edition is called that because they did fix a few things. One thing they fixed was the fact that the mouse look on the original game was so bad, it made people sick. In fact, in the game's actual notes, like of the re-release, it says that one of its fixes is non-nausea-inducing mouse look.
Yeah, that's a good addition.
They also enabled strafing, which was not available in the original version, but the release is definitely very tongue-in-cheek in the sense that people know it's a bad game. It's still being re-released, partially as a preservation thing, also just like, here's the game with some updates to it. But in my opinion, it's one of those games that's so bad, it's kind of fun. It's a bit of a mess. The graphics are all over the place. Nothing's really clear with what you're doing. I got lost very easily in the first level. Most of the enemies are just guys that look like Fidel Castro, complete with cigars. That just, I don't even know if they have guns. I think they just like smack you. But yeah, it's kind of a bad game, but a bad in a fun way. It's kind of like watching a bad movie, like Manos: The Hands of Fate or Plan 9 from Outer Space. I can enjoy them for what they are, despite the fact that they are objectively bad movies. The Fortress of Dr. Radiaki is objectively a bad game, and Fancy Edition does fix some things, but it's still an objectively bad game. But thank God that they made it available so you can play it too. I did want to bring up a couple of the reviews because they're actually pretty funny. In the game's listing on Steam, they actually do reference Civi, the YouTuber, with a quote of his that says, "Everything this game is trying to achieve fails so spectacularly that I couldn't believe what I was seeing." And another review from a Pixel Amusement is, "It's a game that doesn't care that it's awful." And some reviews from players are 0 out of 10 visuals, 0 out of 10 audio, 0 out of 10 gameplay, 0 out of 10 story, 100 out of 10 funny. Best purchase ever made on Steam. Recommended. It's a bad game, arguably. And not even like on a subjective basis, it is a bad game, but I think it's fun, and I actually liked playing it as kind of a goofy thing. So that's The Fortress of Dr. Radiaki Fancy Edition, available on Steam for about $5. I picked it up when it was on sale for like $1. So you can probably pick it up next time it goes on sale
for $1.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to play full price, or you can play the DOS version through like Launchbox, the original version, but that's even worse than the version on Steam. So the Steam version at least fixes some stuff. I will say the Steam version it's not a port. It runs in DOS. A DOS box will open after you go through the menu, so it's still...
It's got just mods.
Yeah, it's just modified. But Seth, what about you? What have you been playing?
So recently, I've been playing Call of the Sea, which came out December 8th of 2020, and it was developed by Out of the Blue Games and published by Raw Fury. In the game, you play as Nora, who is a woman who has an illness, and she is trying to find her husband on this tropical island, and there's a lot of puzzles that you have to figure it out. So maybe you have to figure out how to open a gate or turn a bridge and try to figure out where her husband is. And she had a debilitating illness that, while she's on the island, seems to be suppressed. So she's able to walk, and then she's able to run, and it's part of the puzzle of like what's going on with her. One of the reasons why I picked it up is that it was developed by Out of the Blue Games. I think I've owned it for quite a while. Out of the Blue Games have developed one of my favorite games, American Arcadia, which I talked about before. It's a side-scrolling and also first-person perspective game. A lot of fun. They also are developing the Vigilante Diaries, which I was really excited about in one of our Next Fest times that we talked about some games that we played during Next Fest. And finally, they have a game called Call of the Elder Gods that's coming out, which is going to be the sequel to Call of the Sea. So, I'm interested in playing Call of the Elder Gods, and I never really beat Call of the Sea, so I've been plugging through and playing through Call of the Sea, because I stopped it at a point, and I was like, something else maybe came up. So I recently restarted it, and have been kind of playing through it. It does have a Lovecraftian type of aesthetic to it eventually. I think there's going to be more of Call of the Elder Gods, but it's a fun puzzle adventure game, which is kind of my bread and butter here.
Nice, though. That's very cool. Call of the Sea. Sounds good. Well, today we're talking about a game unrelated to the both games we played. It came out in the 90s, so I guess it's closest related to Fortress of Dr. Radiaki, and it's an adventure game that has puzzle elements, so it makes it similar to Call of the Sea. So there we go. It is similar to both games. But that game is, in fact, Tomb Raider, the original Tomb Raider. And to get first into our memories before we get into the history, I remember we had some family friends who I think had one or two of the Tomb Raider games. They had a bunch of games, but I remember they had a lot of PlayStation games, and I think they had the Tomb Raider games. And I remember playing one of them and having trouble with the controls because I wasn't quite used to them. I wasn't like super familiar with like tank controls yet, so I kind of struggled with the first Tomb Raider. And our dad also, I remember, had a copy for the PC that I played maybe once or twice on his computer, though it didn't run super well because his computer didn't have really good graphics card. So, and the game needed some type of 3D acceleration. But I did end up playing Tomb Raider later in life. I owned one of the games, the second game, for a bit. I think I sold it though, and then I've played them since. And I did just recently grab the remastered version as it was free on PS Plus. I haven't tried it yet, but I'm looking forward to trying it. But those are at least my memories of Tomb Raider. Seth, what about you?
I also recently bought the remastered version to play on my Steam Deck, which has the 1, 2, and 3 remastered, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah, so I recently bought that and was playing it on the Steam Deck, and I forgot how much I hate tank control styles. I do not like tank controls.
Yeah, they can be rough if you're not used to them, or if you just haven't played a game with that style control in a while. That can be really jarring to get into a game with that type of controls.
So, however, my first time playing Tomb Raider was back when I was in middle school. I had a friend who had a Sega Saturn, and on the Sega Saturn was Tomb Raider as well as Nights into Dreams. But yeah, so we played the original I played the original Tomb Raider, not on the PlayStation, which is where I would say 90% of the people in the world played, but on the Sega Saturn, and that's where I played it. I played it for a little bit. We didn't get too far. I think there was some wolves or something that killed us pretty early on, but we were in the house, and the butler and the freezer and all that jazz. And then I've played Tomb Raider on and off. I think the most I played was when they redid it again. First time they redid it, when they brought her back with the whole new model, and it was like, I think that one I played the most of. But I have a friend who really loves Tomb Raider. He plays it. I think he's like 100%ed most of the Tomb Raider games. He's like very much like into the like perfecting the Tomb Raider runs. I think he messaged me once and he said, "Oh, you own this?" Because I own a bunch of the Tomb Raider games because I buy collection packs sometimes. And he said, "Oh, you own this game?" I said, "Yeah." I'm like, I don't think I've ever played it. And he's like, "Can you install it and do a multiplayer with me so I can get an achievement?" And I said, "Okie dokie." And so that was the most I played of that game. But yeah, so that's my experience with the franchise, as it were.
To get into the history of today's episode, Tomb Raider was a game that originally came from a company called Core Design, with the original idea coming from a man named Toby Gard, who was a developer at Core Design, located in Derby, England. Gard got his start at Core when he was hired in 1994 to work on a game called BC Racers, which was a Sega CD and later an MS-DOS game that's a kart racing game set in the Stone Age. That same year, during a planned session to come up with ideas for the upcoming PlayStation console, Guard pitched a concept for an adventure action game. Some of the influences that he had for this idea came from films like Hard Boiled. He wanted the character to have dual pistols and gun fu style action where you could jump around and shoot at the same time. There was also, he wanted to incorporate kind of like grave robbing, adventuring akin to Indiana Jones. And he pitched this idea and got approval from the rest of the core team. After he completed his work on BC Racers, he got to work on developing the game that would eventually become Tomb Raider. Guard's original idea was going to feature a male protagonist, again, similar to Indiana Jones, but it was decided to change this to avoid any potential legal issues. Guard would later plan to allow players to have a choice of either a male or female character, but would settle on just a female character when he realized if he had to do both, that was more work. And he decided, instead of animating and programming 2 player character models, I will do 1. And they don't want a male because we don't want to get sued, so female it is. And that was his logic. And despite the fact that they did settle on a female character, and they intentionally did that to avoid potential legal issues, the game's publisher did try to push them toward making a male player character, but it was kept off the table, and the main character would remain Lara Croft.
The team looked at games like Virtua Fighter and Ultima for ideas, mixing together adventure with design of early 3D graphics. Guard worked with the team in pre-production for about 6 months, coming up with the ideas for the overall game design and concept. The team consisted of around 6 people and had a small budget of around £440,000. The rest of the development would take up around 18 months, with the final months hitting considerable crunch time as the developers had to work overtime. The game took so long that core design was sold to Center Gold and then purchased by Eidos Interactive during the development. See, Producer Doug, we've mentioned Eidos. During development, Lara Croft originally started off as Lara Cruz. So Lara Croft, as I'm sure everyone is aware, is spelled Lara and then Croft. Lara Cruz was Laura. So instead of Lara, it was Laura, and would go through different design tweaks before it was settled on her design. Guard had wanted to avoid stereotypes of the dominatrix or bimbo. They would also intentionally give her some distinct features to appeal to male audiences.
Now, a popular rumor that circulated for quite some time and was actually referenced on our show was that the character's breast size was accidentally set to 150% the scale that they had initially intended due to a coding error. Thus, the story goes, the programmer who was developing the player mesh put in 1 extra 0 by mistake, and it increased Lara's bust size, and the story also goes that one of the publisher reps walked by and gave them a thumbs up, and that's how it goes. However, Guard would actually come out in an interview in 2021 and debunk this. He said that this story, which originally came from him, was just a silly remark that he had made at the time when he was interviewed way back in like 2000. In an article called Debunking the Myth that Lara Croft's design was the result of a bug by Ruth Cassidy for thegamer.com, Guard stated that all of his answers from that interview at the time were entirely flippant, quote unquote, and that he tried to make them as so ridiculous that no one would possibly believe them. Though people did believe them, and in fact, a GameSpot article called Lara Croft's Breasts, An Awful Mistake, likely helped push this myth to its legendary status. Though to be fair, this famous GameSpot article, which I've seen referenced on like Reddit threads before, was published on April 1st, 2000. It was an April Fool's Day prank by GameSpot, who are rather notorious for their April Fool's Day pranks. Them and IGN both have done a lot of work in kind of crafting pretty intense April Fool's Day jokes.
Also, to be fair, it was debunked in 2021.
Yeah.
When we mentioned it about the error, it was during our 10th episode of Iconic Video Game Characters, which was released Sunday, February 9th, 2020. We were not incorrect when we stated what we stated on our release of episode 10. We were misinformed by the general public, information available, because it was not debunked by Guard until 2021. So it's not our fault that we perpetrated the rumor.
We were wrong because We were lied to.
Yes, we were lied to by Guard. He lied to everybody.
That's true.
And he kept that lie for 21 years.
Beyond this, there were various elements in the development of the character and the storyline that would go through changes. For example, her name, Lara Cruz, became Lara Croft. Another early story element was changed in that there was going to be a rival group called the Chaos Raiders. They were removed. The character of Pierre Dupont, who is one of the antagonists of the game, would also change. His original role was going to be a bit more of like a friendly rival who would occasionally help with puzzles. For realism, the team would do research in the Incan Empire, ancient Egypt, and classical Greece. Originally, part of the game was going to be set in Angkor Wat in Cambodia, but this was removed and actually replaced with the Greece setting. The Croft Manor was designed by Guard over a weekend or so, using pictures of a Gregorian mansion that he saw in a reference book. The game itself would be designed for the PlayStation, but versions for MS-DOS and Sega Saturn would be developed simultaneously. The coding for each of these versions of the game is, for the most part, identical, though there's some additional coding used to make the game work best on its given platform. There was also talk with Nintendo to port the game to the N64, with some development being done, at least like design development from what I understood and what I was reading. There were talks and discussion on how to redesign the game to work with a control pad, because fun fact is that the PlayStation and Sega Saturn versions of Tomb Raider play with a D-pad. Keep in mind, while the PlayStation has analog controllers, they didn't ship with analog controllers. Those analog controllers were technically a accessory you bought, the DualShock. It wasn't necessarily the base controller you got. The base controller you got with your original PlayStation was just a D-pad and the 4 face buttons. Now, the N64 has an analog stick, and there were some discussion on how to make the game work well with an analog stick. Though apparently the issue that ended up canceling the game was that Nintendo just didn't send them any development kits, so they couldn't develop the game, and they ultimately scrapped the project. Sony then would sign a deal with Eidos to keep the Tomb Raider games exclusive to the PlayStation until the year 2000, which kind of prevented any future Tomb Raider games, at least till the year 2000, from coming out on the Nintendo. Now, the style of the 3D gameplay, along with the scale of the game, was a significant undertaking, to say the least. The game would use custom 3D engine, the team struggled with 32-bit development, and they needed to craft a level editor to allow for seamless level creation, along with the decision to build the game levels on a grid. Lara's animations would all be hand-animated, as opposed to utilizing motion capture. This was done to keep her movements uniform. The third-person perspective was chosen as the team felt that first-person games oversaturated the market. They wanted their game to stand out. They thought third person was underutilized. However, this also meant developing camera controls and 3D character control. Music of the game would be composed by Nathan McCree, the in-house composer for Core, who was inspired by English classical music. McCree would work directly with Guard, getting notes on Lara's character and using these notes as basis for informing his musical structure.
The game would also feature voice acting, with Shelley Blond providing the voice of Laura. This would be a fairly early role for Shelley, who would later appear in shows like The Bill and Peep Show, as well as other games like Black and White. Shelley stated in an interview that she was often asked to perform the voice in a non-emotive way. She also spent about 4 to 5 hours recording sounds like crying, death sounds, and grunts, which is always fun to imagine, and just probably making huffing noises. Tomb Raider would be announced officially in 1995, and a demo was displayed at E3 in 1996. Eidos would hire actresses to play Lara Croft at trade shows, with Rona Mitra playing the role until 1998. The game was released for the Saturn in Europe in October 1996, and the Saturn, PlayStation, and MS-DOS in November of 1996 in North America. A patch would be released for the MS-DOS version to allow for the game to work on Windows 95, and the game would also be ported to various other systems, such as macOS in 1999, the Pocket PC in 2002, the N-Gage in 2003, iOS in 2015, and Evercade in 2024.
Now, Tomb Raider is a 3D third-person action-adventure game where you take on the role of Lara Croft, an archaeologist who's an archaeologist kind of in the same vein as Indiana Jones is an archaeologist, in that she goes to places and sometimes steals those things that she finds. Which I guess, to be fair, is kind of what other archaeologists do. But she steals them and she carries dual pistols. Well, most archaeologists, I don't believe, carry dual pistols. In the game, game, you play in a third-person perspective. The camera follows Lara around, and you have to climb around various ledges and jump to different places, making the game a bit of a platformer at times. Lara controls using what we've referred to as tank controls. We've talked about tank controls before. These are used in Resident Evil, Silent Hill, the original Alone in the Dark, but what this means is that she moves in relative position to her player model, not the camera. So she doesn't necessarily move the way you'd expect her to move if you're not familiar with tank controls. Weapons in the game include her dual pistols, which are thankfully stocked with unlimited ammo. You can also pick up a shotgun. There are dual magnums you can find, and dual Uzi submachine guns. The plot of the game involves Lara Croft being hired to search for a mysterious artifact in the tomb of Qualalopec in the Peruvian Andes. She discovers the artifact, known as the Scion, and is then ambushed by a mercenary named Larson, who reveals that there are 2 other pieces of the artifact. Finding all 3 pieces grants the wielder of the artifact with unbelievable powers and the ability to create mutant super soldiers. So it's up to Lara to save the world, because Lara might be an archaeologist who likes money, but she's also a good person who doesn't want the world to get destroyed. And that's pretty much the game. You go to different places looking for pieces of the Scion. Now, Seth, how did Tomb Raider do?
Tomb Raider was a massive success for Eidos. In the years prior to the release of the game, Eidos was notably dealing with some loss. The previous year, they reported $2.5 million in pre-tax loss, which is not great for a company that wants to keep their lights on. After release of the game, they reported $14.5 million in profit, which is great for a company that wants to keep their lights on.
Yeah, they could run the lights all day if they want.
They could. I bet they were so happy to be able to turn those off, turn those on, and say, "All right, everybody, lights back on."
Lights back on the menu, boys.
By 1997, the game sold 2.5 million units worldwide. The game was also incredibly popular with critics who praised the game's graphics, environments, gameplay, and variety. Computer and Video Games gave the Saturn version a 5 out of 5. Edge gave the PlayStation and PC version a 9 out of 10. And IGN gave the game a 9.3 out of 10. It would go on to receive multiple Games of the Year awards from different publications, and in 1999 would win a Berners-Lee Interactive BAFTA, which is probably one of the higher awards that a video game could win for this time period.
Yeah.
1999, winning a BAFTA for a video game was that was not something that was done very often.
Along with the official ports, there is an open source version of Tomb Raider called Open Lara, which allows the game to be ported to 3DO, the 32X, the Xbox, the Nintendo 3DS, and there was a Game Boy Advance version that was released just a few years ago by fans. So people have brought the game everywhere. Infamously, a fan-made patch of Tomb Raider was released basically around the time the game was released, called Nude Raider, which, as one could expect, does exactly what it says on the tin. Nude Raider makes Lara Croft nude. Eidos would send a cease and desist to the website that hosted the patch, and would also send cease and desists to the website that hosted naked images of Lara, some of them being screenshots of the patch. A rumor would circulate that this patch was actually a cheat code. So there was a rumor that circulated a bit at the time that this wasn't just a patch you downloaded, this was something the developers intended to be in the game. This is not true, but what is true is that apparently there was some push from upper management for the developers to include a nudity code, but they outright refused. And in fact, they refused so hard that they did put a secret code in the sequel, Tomb Raider 2, and this code makes Lara explode.
It's funny because back then you could do stuff like that. You could say this is the secret to you can leak that there's a secret that it's a nudity patch, and people didn't have captured game footage and all that stuff that was just readily available. You can do that today. You couldn't leak a secret and be this is a secret. It would be found out immediately. Someone would try it out and post it on YouTube and everyone would watch it and immediately. But imagine all the kids at home that are yeah, finally I got Tomb Raider 2. I got this secret code, and you put it in, it just blows up. Just
it's hilarious.
Get out of here, kids. That kid's so disappointed.
Now, speaking of the sequel, Tomb Raider 2 starring Lara Croft would be released in 1997. Then there would be Tomb Raider 3, The Adventures of Lara Croft, released in 1998. Then there would be Tomb Raider: The Last Revelation in 1999. Then Tomb Raider Chronicles in 2000. And then Tomb Raider: Angel of Darkness in 2003. But what's important to note is that, remember how I told you Sony had exclusive license to put out Tomb Raider games until the year 2000. They made damn sure that they were getting Tomb Raider games until the year 2000, because there was a Tomb Raider game every year from its release in 96 until 2000, with the only gap being between Chronicles and Angel of Darkness.
This is just the core games that were getting released. There was
Yes.
also like portable games getting released, like The Prophecy and Curse of the Sword. Both of those would have Tomb Raider before that. So Tomb Raider, Curse of the Sword, Tomb Raider Prophecy were released for like portables and all that jazz. So like Tomb Raider property they were maximizing Laura's potential.
100%. Now, in 2006, Crystal Dynamics would release Tomb Raider Legend, a reimagining of the series. This would then be followed by Tomb Raider Anniversary in 2007, which wasn't a sequel to Tomb Raider Legend, but was in fact a remake of the first Tomb Raider game. And then Legend would get a sequel called Tomb Raider Underworld in 2008.
Another reimagining where they just reset everything was just called Tomb Raider. It was released in 2013. There's a reason for part of this, is that, first of all, Core Design handled a lot of the earlier games, and then Core Design went defunct and then went into Crystal Dynamics, and Crystal Dynamics is still the developer today for Tomb Raider, but they changed publishers a couple of times with Square Enix, and now they're owned by Amazon, but also Embracer. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing. But like when Square Enix took over, they rebooted Tomb Raiders. So like whether or not Crystal Dynamics wanted to reboot them, but that's when they redesigned Tomb Raider, possibly coming down from Square Enix, saying like, hey, let's redo Tomb Raider, let's do it this way, and may have driven a lot of the art changes, because when they reimagined Tomb Raider, Lara Croft looks dramatically different. And this reimagining, this 2013 Tomb Raider game, is the one that I've played the most of. It was released to critical acclaim, and there were 2 sequels that continued this new continuity of Lara Croft: The Rise of the Tomb Raider and Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which would be released in 2015 and 2018 respectively. I liked the first game. I did not like it enough to buy the sequels. With the dawn of the new era, since Square Enix no longer owns the IP, they are looking to reimagine it, and they're doing another revival with the Tomb Raider Legacy of Atlantis. This is set to be another remake of the original Tomb Raider, and this is also not being done by the Square Enix group, because Square Enix is no longer running the property, and now it's Embracer, Amazon, whatever, something's going on over there. There is also another plan for a game in 2027, which is Tomb Raider Catalyst, which is going to be the sequel to Underworld. So I imagine if those games sell well, we're going to see this new version of old Laura back, and not the new version of new old Laura from Square Enix. She's going to go away. 2 remastered collections of Tomb Raider have also been released: Tomb Raider 1 and through 3 in 2024, which is free on PS Plus for the month of April, and Tomb Raider 4 through 6, which was released in February of 2025. Outside of the game, there have also been 3 Tomb Raider films: Lara Croft Tomb Raider in 2001, Lara Croft Tomb Raider The Cradle of Life in 2003, both which star Angelina Jolie as Lara Croft. And in 2018, a movie called Just Tomb Raider was released based on the reimagined canon from the 2013 game, and this film starred Alicia Vikander as Lara Croft. A TV show is currently in development from Amazon Prime, and Phoebe Waller-Bridge serving as a showrunner, and Sophie Turner is now going to be playing Lara Croft. There was also a Netflix animated series starring Haley Atwell as Lara Croft, which takes place after Shadow of the Tomb Raider. One of the interesting things that I think is fun about Tomb Raider is if I go back and think about Tomb Raider during the 2000s, I think of Angelina Jolie as Tomb Raider.
Yeah.
But she was only in 2 movies.
Yeah.
But I think part of it is because at some point in time, the video game Tomb Raider started to look like Angelina Jolie.
So part of when I was researching for this episode, I remember Angel of Darkness being out because I remember seeing the box art for it.
I think I owned Angel of Darkness.
Yes, I think you did. And I remember part of me, when I was looking it up earlier, was thinking to myself, wasn't Angel of Darkness the name of the Lara Croft movie with Angelina Jolie? And I was getting confused with Cradle of Life. But I think it's because they were released so close to each other that it felt like they were tie-ins.
I just feel like during that time, Angelina Jolie just kind of represented Lara Croft.
She did, yeah. I mean, she really embraced the role.
Even only being in 2 movies. Then both of those movies weren't that great either, from what I recall.
No, I think they were mostly moneymakers. But I was doing some research into how Embracer Group fits all in, and it doesn't make much sense. It has to do a lot with the rights holding. They own like some of the rights, and Amazon owns the other rights. And
specifically when it comes to Tomb Raider, Embracer and Amazon are mixed in together.
Yeah, well, that and Middle-earth.
That makes sense.
Because Embracer's also involved in that too.
Yeah, it's going to get even worse when Warner Brothers, because didn't Warner Brothers have...
Warner Brothers is also part of it. It's Warner, Amazon, Embracer for the Lord of the Rings IP.
Lord of the Rings, yeah. It's going to get a lot worse when Warner Brothers sales goes through.
That's going to be it for our Tomb Raider episode. Maybe we'll revisit the games later. I think some of those later games, such as the ones for the PlayStation and then into the later releases from Core, can be interesting games to talk about maybe down the line. But that's not for today. Today we're going to get into our Retro Rewind, and that's the game that Seth had me recently play back for last week, which was Timegate Knight's Chase for Windows 9X. I played the Windows 98 version.
Which we saw
at PAX, right? Someone was selling it.
We took a picture of it, and we said, oh, this looks like a fun game.
So Timegate Knight's Chase was developed by Infogrames Multimedia in 1996. It's a puzzle-solving adventure game where you play as a guy named William Tibbs, and William's girlfriend gets kidnapped and brought to a museum in Paris. You gotta find her. She's kidnapped by the Knights Templar, and then you go into the past and you become a knight.
Ooh.
It's an odd sort of game, and it plays a lot like Alone in the Dark because it is in fact built in the same engine as Alone in the Dark, hence the similarity. I found it to be, in all fairness, a little average, at least the parts that I was playing.
Was it scary as Alone in the Dark?
No, and that was probably one of the worst. That's probably what I think helps Alone in the Dark stand out, and what made this game not as good as Alone in the Dark, at least from what I played, is in the first 5 minutes of Alone in the Dark, you were thrown into action when a dog creature bursts through a window and attacks you. For the first 5 minutes of this game, I was wandering around a museum being told I couldn't go into rooms.
Alone in the Dark is terrifying.
To this day. I don't think this game ever was intended to be a horror game, but it just doesn't put you into the action fast enough for what I expected for this type of game. I was like, I didn't even get to the time travel part. I think you just get like randomly thrown back in time. I was dodging lasers at one point, and I still don't know how to get past them. Interesting game. Do I think it holds up? I don't think it doesn't hold up, but I also think it does. I don't think it does hold up. I think it's kind of it's definitively a meh kind of game. Overall, okay. I might play a little bit more of it later, see how much further I can get. Next week, Seth, you can play Dungeon Hack for MS-DOS.
Great. Zach had me play Hillsfar for the NES, originally developed by Westwood and published by SSI on MS-DOS. The NES version was developed by Crosstalk and published by FCI. It was also released on the Amiga, Atari ST, and Commodore 64. The release for the DOS game and the computers was back, and for the other computers was back in 1989, and then they did a port in 1993 for NES. Now, let's talk about Hillsfar. Did you want to take your fun gold box character and play them out in an action RPG game? Look no further than Hillsfar, a combination action RPG that had first-person exploring in towns, an action sequence like riding a horse. You can even level your character up and export them from one gold box game to the next gold box game. Oh, wait, you have the NES version? Can't do any of that fun stuff. The NES version is a standalone RPG that has action elements stuck in, but it is a kind of like an expansion to Pool of Radiance, because it's like on the PC when it was released in 1989, you could take your Pool of Radiance character, export them, put them into the game, level them up a little bit, power them up, and then import them into Curse of the Azure Bonds, which was the next game. Could not do that with the NES because it was a standalone. So it was like a half viable game, and the game's not that great. You have to, like, if you want to play a game where you make weird grunting noises in a town and then get on a horse and fall off it multiple times, go ahead. I don't think the NES version stands up. I think the PC version barely stands up, if it does. It didn't stand up back then. It certainly doesn't stand up now. Next week, Zach, you could play 1830 Railroads and Robber Barons.
I'm really excited to play this game. I love trains. Well, thank you everyone for listening to today's episode. If you have any thoughts about the original Tomb Raider games, let us know. You can email us at classicgamingbrothers@gmail.com. We're available wherever podcasts can be found via Podbean, iTunes, or iHeartRadio. We're available on all the major social medias. Check us out, Classic Gaming Brothers, CG Brothers Pod. We're available on Patreon. We're available on YouTube. Like and subscribe. We're also available on our website, of course, www.classicgamingbrothers.com. Seth, am I forgetting anything?
Don't play games like my brother.
And don't play games like my brother.
I've been Seth.
And I've been Zach.
And we've been the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.
Right.